Hi, everyone. So we are so lucky to have a VIP guest with us. And we talking about celiac this whole month. And I had said, who best to hear it from than a patient who is living with the disease. And, it's not something you cure, right? It's something you live with for the rest of your life. And just learning from them about how the diagnosis came about, how it's affected their lives in general. And my patients are just so amazing that they offer to share. And so this is truly a gift for all of us. And I want to welcome Stephanie, who last minute was like, okay, I'll do it, Dr. V, let's get on. And she's in her car after work having this quick conversation. But Stephanie, thank you for joining us and being available to chat with me.
It's no problem at all.
Awesome. All right. So let's jump right into it. How did they find out about celiac disease for you? How did we come up with the diagnosis? How long had you been having symptoms and what kind of symptoms were you having?
Okay, so I had symptoms for about a year actually before I was able to even see anybody. But part of that year, because the symptoms were severe diarrhea, it was all year, stomach pains all year. I was just living with that all year, not knowing what was wrong with me. Um, had to get insurance, got thrown around through the insurance. So every time my insurance would be like, you could go see this doctor, I would wait 2 months to get in, and it would turn out they'd be like, "Oh, I can't see you. Something's wrong with your insurance." So that process took a year. That was 8 months or so, and that's how I finally ended up in your arms over there. You're the one that actually we went through and did the endoscopy and the colonoscopy, uh,
Hmm.
and had to actually investigate further because we couldn't figure
Yeah.
out what it was. And for some reason, you're just like, let's try a celiac test, and did a
Yeah.
blood panel. And I was surprised because nobody
Yes.
has it. Nobody
Yeah.
has it, and it's genetic, and
Yeah.
that's
Wow.
crazy.
That's crazy. So many things I'm picking up from you. Like you look like you're in your early 30s, right? Late
It's,
Mid 30s, okay. And you only started having diarrhea a year before the diagnosis was made, which means did you feel like you had symptoms even further back and it got worse?
it's hard to say. I feel like I felt something depending on stuff I drank. Like for some reason, I thought beer hurt me, and that could have been something.
Mm.
That could have been
It could
something.
have been the wheat and the barley. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
I always thought, maybe I'm allergic to beer, but celiac, I had no idea it was linked, and that was gluten. That was all new to me figuring this out. But 10 years before, I might have had some symptoms. Now, I can't
Okay.
whether or not it was directly related or anything
Okay.
because
Yeah.
this were much more severe after
Right.
this all came up after COVID. I was
Yeah.
completely fine.
Wow.
Complete.
Yeah.
I feel like something got triggered after
After
that.
COVID. So interesting that you mentioned this, and this is such an important point, right? Um, so many pearls that you're sharing that I think people can learn from. You don't have to have had symptoms since you were a baby,
No.
right, to be diagnosed with celiac. It can present at any time, and it is an autoimmune disease. So, like autoimmune diseases, you may have the genetics, but something just pulls that trigger, and I think it was COVID for you, right? We noticed that COVID
Yeah.
was triggering a lot of autoimmune conditions.
Yes.
And when we look at the current literature, we're seeing that there is a rise in the number of people that have celiac disease today. So there is definitely, they say every year, every 10 years, we're seeing almost a 7% increase in the incidence of celiac. And they think some of this is definitely because it's environmental triggers. So infection, pollutants, chemicals, things like that trigger it in people. And what the third point that I want to make that's really interesting, just from the first question we asked you, is that there's no one else in your family with it.
No. No. And half of some of, not wouldn't say half. Some of them are testing themselves, and they're not coming.
Now,
So
they're
it's
not,
insane of
yeah.
why I had this in my system. And
But are they testing the genetics or are they just testing
told them to go in and ask for a full panel.
full panel?
What I
Yeah,
asked them to do, because I was
yeah,
like, there's a way it shows up, I guess, and you have to do the
yeah.
full figure that
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, I think, and with you, with your family members, it may be helpful for them to just test the genetics just to kind of see. because sometimes we'll find people that then maybe you do have the genetics and they have it as well, and potentially if they have symptoms. But another point that you highlighted here, one of the other pearls that I got from this was EGD colonoscopy looked fine, right? So they always say like EGD is the gold standard, but we actually found it on the blood work,
Yeah.
on the serological testing, and you were like clearly positive. And I remember, Steph, when I told you, you were a little bit in disbelief. You were like,
Yeah.
are you sure, Dr. V? Like, are you really? You want to check again?
Because nothing I've been affiliated with.
Yeah, was connected to that. Okay.
Not gonna lie, I'm probably the girl that loves bread most in the world, so it's very sad times.
I remember you saying that. I remember you saying that. So, what do you feel like now with the diagnosis? What has it taught you? What are you doing differently? I know you're not eating gluten anymore, but what
Well,
do you feel you're doing differently overall in terms of your health and wellness?
to be honest, I feel like getting the diagnosis and having to change my complete lifestyle, I feel healthier.
Oh,
Uh,
that's
I'm not
good.
gonna lie, I feel healthier because I drink more water.
Yeah,
Clearly, no beer because all
yeah,
that's for me is seltzers, I guess.
yeah.
And you really have to watch what you're putting in your body. So you're actually looking at all these ingredients at this point in time.
All right. So you're reading every label, you're making sure. And so that means you're also not just avoiding gluten, but you're probably avoiding other bad stuff that could be in there, right? As you're looking at the
Yeah,
labels, you're like,
at the label anyway, and I see a ton of sodium. I'm like,
yeah, I'm not having that. Okay. Ah, that's great. That's
uh,
really good. Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. That's good. And so you were feeling bad for a year, and we made the diagnosis, and I was like, you got to go gluten free, and then gluten free, gluten free. And from the time you went gluten free to, I mean, we saw each other after, like a couple weeks to months later, right? And you were already doing so much better. But how long did it take for you for the diarrhea to like go away?
oh, to be honest, it wasn't right away, but I would say
Hmm.
within the first 4 weeks, you could see improvement.
Improvement. Okay.
After a month, it became solid again, and
Oh, wow.
it
Um,
started becoming more normal. It did take some time. It wasn't right away or anything like that because I think when
okay.
I started the gluten-free diet, I think my own self, my body, I guess, freaked out and triggered in some sort of way because I didn't feel
Mhm.
good for a while. And I
Mhm.
think that was just the change, the
It's
complete change.
yeah, yeah. And I remember, Stephanie, we did some like micronutrients. We checked your iron, your B12. We kind
Yeah.
of did micronutrients just to tank you up. And I hope that that's something you're going to continue on an annual basis, just checking those things and making sure. And as you did all your research, now you're like, oh my gosh, I have celiac disease and I have to go gluten free and all that. And you start reading about what is celiac and all that. What are one or two things that you learned about celiac that you really did not know?
To be honest, about celiac disease, I don't know, this kind of revolves off from the aspect. I had no idea just how many foods are unfriendly to gluten. That's
Hmm.
really no idea.
Mm.
So that came as a shocker. Let me see
And
what
not
else.
just foods, right? Gluten, it's not just foods, even, right? Gluten is, yeah. Vitamins. I love that you bring it up. Supplements. Yes. So you have to check and look and make sure it says no gluten here, no wheat, right? No wheat, no
Yeah,
gluten.
it was a random fact we learned at lunch. Play-Doh has gluten in it. So if you have kids, clearly they can't be putting Play-Doh in their mouth. It's full of flour. I was like, what?
Listen to that.
That's
That is a
crazy.
pearl. Yes. Wow. So if you have kids, definitely. I think moms and parents with kids with celiac disease know this. I've heard this about Play-Doh as well. So yeah, you gotta look at what it's used as, like almost like a glue in a lot of products. Like
Yep.
I just read today that retainers have gluten in them. Retainers. Yeah.
Dang.
I was so surprised to hear of a situation where a young girl had a retainer and she had celiac and everything was gluten free, like it was so gluten zero, but she kept having diarrhea and she kept having like tiny amounts of the serology pop up, and they realized that her retainer, when they contacted the manufacturer, had gluten. Gluten was used as the glue to put it all together. Yeah. Yeah. Oh wow, this has been a wealth of information. So quick question, did you lose weight?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, I lost weight while I was sick.
Yes.
Clearly,
Yes.
you know, you weren't normal, and when we did like the endoscopy and everything, my intestines weren't absorbing properly because of, I guess, like a gut leak. So I
Mm-hmm.
think I was absorbing properly anyway. But after the gluten-free diet, it was another 10 pounds gone. That was another
Mhm.
thing. Gluten's fattening,
Yes.
very fattening.
Very fattening. Yes.
Like,
Yes.
I look completely different, feel completely different. I feel like my skin actually feels better being
Okay.
on diet now 7 months.
Yes. Wonderful. Wonderful. And probably your hair and skin, right? Probably
And
all too
I
much.
was, I did feel like I was losing my hair quite
Yeah,
a
because I can see your hair looks like it's grown, right?
I,
Some
I
highlights on you.
feel like it's not, coming out as much. So it
Yes.
has something to do with it.
Yes, absolutely. That's absolutely. Tell me about the expense. Is it expensive to lead a gluten-free life?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
a reality. It's a reality. It's
Yeah, everything's gone up in the world
yeah.
anyway, but
Yeah.
our products are now 20% more than that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
It
it's
is
definitely
crazy.
something that a half a loaf of bread is $8.
Uh-huh. I know.
But it's definitely different.
It's different. It's different. I was doing the literature as I was, preparing for this campaign in May. And in Italy, people who have celiac disease get a stipend from the government
Ugh, why
for
can't we?
food. Yeah, for food and beverages because they realize that they're having to pay more for gluten-free products. Yeah, they get a stipend every month from the government. Yeah.
I That's something we had.
I wish. We wish. Well, let's not dive into healthcare in the United States. It's exactly what happened, insurance and this and that and
Uh,
yeah, so I totally get it. But this has been a wealth of information, Stephanie. I think a lot of people will enjoy hearing what you had to share. Some great information, some great tips. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It was good to hear from you again.
You too. Take care, my dear. Bye.
Bye.
So I had the absolute honor and pleasure of being able to ask some of my patients if they were willing to kind of give their own testimony, right? Their own personal journey as to how they were diagnosed and how they've been living with celiac disease. And I thought Denise was the perfect person because her journey has been going on for 30 years, right, Denise? 30 years?
Correct. Yes.
Awesome. So really, thank you for being here today. I want to ask you a couple questions that I think will enlighten our audience. Anyone who suspects they may have symptoms, who have family members with symptoms and need to get checked. But so the diagnosis was made 30 years ago. And how were you feeling? Like what prompted you to go get checked? What was going on?
Well, I think I have the story that every celiac around the world has, from my understanding, is it took me 10 years to get a diagnosis. And from my understanding, I was, after I found out, I was going to a support group. Nobody knew about celiac then. That was a new
Yeah.
word,
Yeah.
especially in the United States. In Italy and it was different. So
Yes.
I was feeling bloated every time I ate. I felt so bloated. And when I had a bowel movement, it was very painful. And I was not what they would consider the classic celiac. I didn't have diarrhea, I was constipated. So no one paid attention to me because I was not that
The
classic.
classic
Yes.
bloating and constipation were your predominant symptoms. That was it.
Yes. And I was miserable. So
Wow.
I just started looking. And so I came to the conclusion that it was either Crohn's, celiac, or colitis.
Okay. Okay.
So
So you thought it was like Crohn's disease or colitis disease, but you didn't really know about celiac, right? You
I
didn't
didn't know about celiac, but I knew it was one of those three.
know those three. So
Mhm.
then we're in these support groups. They started talking about it. And then what was your next step? That seemed to have prompted you to ask for the test or something?
I did go to a support group and I left there and said, no, I don't have that because I'm not eating that way.
Mhm.
long
Mm.
story short, I happened to run into the woman who runs the national group, and she sent me to a doctor who specializes in it. After 10 years of being to many doctors and getting no place, and then I was confirmed celiac.
Wow. So they did the test, they confirmed the diagnosis. And how did you feel that day when they told you? There must have been some relief, like, okay, now I know what's going on,
Well,
right?
yeah, yes, it was a relief. And he was very kind, even though he said, this will drastically change your social life. But I
Mhm.
really have tried never to let it change my
Okay.
social life
Yeah.
at all. I
Oh,
know what I
okay.
have to do. I never cheat because there's nothing that tastes that good
Yeah.
for me to feel miserable. So,
So when you went gluten-free, when you decided, okay, I'm going to embrace this, I'm going to stick with the only treatment that exists for celiac, which is going gluten-free, how did your symptoms change and how long did it take for your symptoms to change?
almost within a week. Yeah,
Wow.
it was almost a week. And yeah, I just it was a learning curve for me, but you learn quickly what you can have and what you can't have. So,
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So finish this sentence for me. Living with celiac disease has taught me dot, 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 dot. What would you say?
hmm, pay attention to my body, my symptoms. It's very important because they will tell you, and go from there.
Absolutely. I love that. When something is off, you got to listen to your body and what
Yeah.
what it's telling you. If you could debunk one common myth about celiac disease, what would it be? Something people think is true, but now as you've lived with the disease, you know.
Um, hmm, nothing really comes to mind. I don't know. I just know people who don't understand. Well, you can surely have just a little bit. You could have a spoon, you know.
Right.
So
Right.
they don't understand. But I don't know if there's anything that I could
Well, I think
debunk.
that's a big one. Like, it's you just can't, you have to go gluten zero.
Yes.
Zero. You can't just go gluten less or gluten, a little bit gluten free here and there.
Right.
You have to be gluten zero to make sure. And one thing you said, Denise, that I would really love for other people to hear and learn from, you said, I didn't want this to affect my social life and I didn't let it. What are
Right.
some things you did to make sure that it didn't affect your social life? You could still go out with friends, you could still go to a birthday party. Like, what did you do?
Yes, I still did. I had people over to my house. I made sure I checked menus before I went to a restaurant. I have a lot of friends who knew, so they would say, "What can you have? Read these ingredients. Tell me what
Mhm.
you can and can't have." Or going gluten free is expensive. So I would always offer to take, or if somebody insisted on baking or cooking, giving them the ingredients. It just
Ah,
it just makes it easier. And because it is expensive, and for them to go out and buy a bag of gluten-free flour that they're never going to use again.
and they're not going to use it after they make that one batch. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that
So
is so,
checking ahead of time,
yeah.
being prepared.
Being prepared at all times. This really
Yeah.
makes you, yeah, definitely being prepared. And how has it been for the family? You told
Um,
me about your sisters, and I'd like to learn more about that.
yes, I have three other sisters. They're all gluten-free. Uh, one for sure is celiac, and the other ones are intolerant,
Okay.
but I think they're celiac.
They
They did
haven't
not have
tested
biopsies. I'm sorry.
get the serology, the blood work.
From my understanding back then, the blood work was not, you could get a
Very,
lot of,
yes.
yes,
Now
positive,
it's better.
negative.
Now it's better
Okay.
because there's so many, there are like 5 markers that we can actually check individually, right? So it
Right.
is better now. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think they did a DNA. I think theirs was through DNA, and I don't know if they ended up
Okay.
with DQ2 or DQ8.
Okay.
But I don't think that is, I don't think it's reliable to do it that way either, because I had after the fact, because they didn't have this 30 years ago, I did that through 23andMe, and it said not likely to have celiac disease. In spite of the fact I had DQ2,
So that's still,
DQ1.
yes,
Yeah,
DQ2, DQ1. Okay, yeah, that's still, I mean, DQ2, you still have DQ2, so there's still a chance there,
right,
right? Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So the way 23andMe reports it is that if you have just the DQ1 halotype versus both DQ2, then it increases your risk. But once you have that halotype, you still definitely have a risk. So yeah. So
Yep.
you're definitely a positive. Well, this has been eye-opening because one thing I do right now in my practice, from seeing so many patients like you, is pretty much everyone who comes in with constipation, I test for celiac.
Yeah.
I just test for celiac automatically, right? The second thing that I'm truly going to consider is, when I have family members, when I have patients who say, well, I have a family member with celiac, I often will test, right? And sometimes I'll even scope. And if they're negative, I keep looking for something else. I'm like, well, could it be something else, right? But I think what I'm going to do differently is if I test them and I've done a pretty good basic workup and they're negative, I'd probably advise them just to go gluten-free. Because there's high likelihood that if it's a sister, a mother, or whatever, that they may have some non-celiac gluten sensitivity and they just need to stop.
Absolutely. And that
Yeah.
was the case with my sisters.
Yeah, I think, just telling them, just go ahead and go gluten-free once the test has been done. So
And
uh-huh.
well, how do you feel about other grains? Because some say no grains at all.
So some
What?
grains affect some people. I mean, with celiac, we know that wheat, barley, and rye.
Mm-hmm.
We know that some oats are going to be issue as well for some people. We know that there's cross-reactivity with some of
Right.
the grains as well. So it can be limiting.
Yeah.
Can be limiting. How do you do with grains? Other grains?
I don't do well.
You don't do
And
well. Yes.
rice. Jasmine rice, but only one brand. So,
Okay.
it's hit and miss. So I really have to stay away from grains.
Yeah.
Just all of them.
Yeah, all grains. Yeah. Yeah. So this must mean you eat a diet rich in fruits and vegetables and protein, most likely. To maybe potato, sweet potato.
Sweet potato, I can't do the white potatoes.
Yeah.
It's very weird. Like I said, it's listening to your body. So I'm mostly paleo.
Mostly.
Meat and very little fruit, really. Some berries, but not a lot.
That sounds to me like a pretty healthy diet, right? For someone who has autoimmune, it's the best therapeutic food plan to be on.
Right.
And I feel like once autoimmune, always autoimmune, right? So I also don't believe in this thing where people will do the food plan for like 3 or 6 months and then go back. I think you just stick on it because your body's obviously telling you that these
Right.
foods cause more autoimmune issues. Yeah. So that's really wise. Words of wisdom, guys. We have learned so much in a short period of time. Denise, I really appreciate you jumping on
Sure.
and sharing your story with us. I really, really appreciate it. And we want to make sure the word gets out there and more people get tested for celiac, because looking at the study, celiac disease is on the rise. It is becoming more and more common.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Denise. Have a good day.
Do
Bye.
this.